All right, guys, what's up? We are joined here with Marvin Merriweather. He is in Springfield, Illinois, and he is the owner of Be Strong Mental Health and Therapeutic Services. And I had the pleasure of meeting Marvin in a swimming pool on February 1st. We did a little CrossFit competition at our local gym, and Marvin was there, and I've never seen someone swim so fast. Like, if you don't know, Marvin, I was still doing laps, and I look up, and you're out of the water, and I asked him, I was like, "What's he doing?" Like, "Oh, he's already done." And I was like, "What?" Like, I still got like 4 laps to do. So, like, I was thoroughly impressed, and that was the first time I met you, and that was the first time we ever talked, and the only time we ever talked, actually. But
Cool.
once we got hooked up here, and I knew that what you were offering is something that could be very beneficial to probably a lot of the guys in this group, and I asked you to come on and kind of share some stuff with us and go from there. So I'm excited to have you here, Marvin.
No, I'm excited to be here. I mean, I enjoy, I don't really interact much in the group, but I enjoy seeing all the positive topics, all the positive things that everybody's kind of engaged in. It's amazing to see men really open up and kind of take that step to kind of to better emotional health. And I support everything you're doing in the group, brother. And if it
Awesome.
makes you feel better, I used to swim in high school. I swam all 4 years of high school, and I was a lifeguard. So
That does
there's
make
that.
it makes me feel a lot better. It makes it feel a
So
lot better. And we were just briefly talking before I got on here, and and the reason I asked you is because you had kind of told me with your background and things that you talk about. And we were talking about relationships, this month, and we're kind of talking about anxiety, and just as men, it's hard for us to express our feelings and emotions. And then, I didn't mention this to you, but it hits along the lines of kind of our self-image and our self-worth, self-love. And, what are your thoughts on that? And I know with your background, like you're helping dudes with this exact stuff. So give us a little insight. Where do we start?
um, I mean, I guess a good place to start is kind of really defining what anxiety is, and then we can kind of hopefully tie it into how it kind of manifests in relationships and bleeds over into the rest of our lives. So basically, anxiety is just a anticipation of a future threat or danger that's usually associated with some fear or emotional response of a real or perceived kind of imminent threat. So you could have made it up in your mind, kind of thing, or it could be an actual thing that's coming up that you're kind of creating some an emotional response to. So that emotional response might look like some depression at times. You can have some physical symptoms like heart racing, sweating, sweaty palms. What else? Some people get really hot and tense and things like that. So understanding that that is anxiety, depending on what you have coming up, or whatever you're kind of thinking about in your head that's creating that anxiety.
And now with anxiety and depression and all that stuff can be treated with medicine. But do you think that it's possible to, train our brains to overcome these things by changing our thought processes?
Absolutely. I fully support medication or treating anxiety and depression with medication if it's to that extent. Some people, basically, you can train the brain to kind of or reprogram the brain, and it takes work. And you say it all the time in your 2 minute Mondays. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But
Yeah.
sometimes we're unaware subconsciously of all the things that have affected us in the past, and we're not really aware of how it's affecting us currently. So getting a grasp on that, it helps you kind of start to change those behaviors. And it's not easy. It's really, really hard. But eventually, if you continue to kind of work at it, you can overcome some of those things. But I do wholeheartedly agree that sometimes medication is necessary.
Yeah. And when you say that, like, is it, this is probably a weird question, but, so every morning I do affirmations, regarding my health and my physical fitness and stuff like that. And I heard
Mhm.
recently, like, and even whenever we set goals in life, like, I don't know, do we have to know exactly how? I don't believe we know how we're going to reach that goal. As long as we put that goal in our brain, it kind of starts manifesting over time. And is it okay to say we can lie to ourselves, fake
Oh,
it till you make
absolutely,
it? Is that the real
absolutely.
deal?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a good thing, but positive affirmations, that's usually kind of one of those steps, and one, decreasing some anxiety and kind of putting it in the universe. I tell people all the time, if you want something to manifest in your life, you got to start to put it in the universe. You have to talk about it. You have to tell people about it, because one, by telling people about it, they hold you accountable. That's that accountability partner. And you kind of put some pressure on yourself, like, I have to do this because I have to prove to people, that I can do what I said I'm going to do. So I support, you being or waking up every morning having those positive affirmations. You have to put yourself in a good headspace in order to tackle some of these underlying, mental health concerns.
For sure. And when we talk about anxiety, you know, obviously, I feel like for most of us, and you're probably more well aware of this than I am, but like with the people that you talk to, like we have to start from our past. Like, I mean, I feel like majority of the issues that I struggle with are from when I was
Mm-hmm.
a kid, or something that happened growing up. Somebody said something to me, and I start believing those stories over time, and it's like, how when you're working with men, how do you get them to uncover the past or even want to talk about it? Because a group of almost 600 guys in here, we don't. It's hard for guys to talk about stuff, and you probably see that every single day.
It is hard, but understanding where you come from, understanding how the anxiety, where it actually comes from, and how it's created is really key in kind of moving past it and kind of learning to deal with it and learn to tolerate anxious situations a lot better. So, for example, anxiety is created in two different pathways in the brain, and take this, don't take this, completely serious, because I'm not a neuroscience or a scientist or anything like that. But I do kind of have an idea of how anxiety is created as a therapist. So
Mhm.
there's two different pathways in the brain that creates anxiety. There's the
Hold on, before you
cortex.
start,
Yeah.
you guys aren't taking notes on this. Like I'm taking, if you see me looking down, I'm taking a bunch of notes because I want to. I love learning about this stuff because we need to. Like you're telling me two ways how I can understand my anxiety. Yeah, I want to know. So let's go.
All right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I mean, so, and understanding where it comes from is good, and how it's created in the brain is usually that first step, and kind of the thought process clicking, like, oh, this is anxiety kind of ramping up in my head. I need to start to take these steps or create a plan to get out of this anxious situation. But so the cortex is anxiety is created in two different forms or two different pathways. One is the cortex. Our cortex is kind of responsible for all of our memories. It actually ignites the anxiety. It can be kind of created through kind of thoughts and images, or perceive, the way you perceive things, the way you think about things. Like I said, memories, and it takes a while for the cortex to respond. So the second part of that is the amygdala. The amygdala fires immediately, and its response is off of what the cortex kind of sees, those memories, those thoughts, and things like that. And it's responsible for that fight, flight, freeze response. So if that kind of makes sense, uh, kind of using an example, say you kind of walk into a room and you see a 6 foot black stick on the ground, and you have a big fear of snakes. The cortex is automatically going to remember those memories and those events in the past, and it's kind of processing like, oh, what is that black stick over there in the corner? But that amygdala is already like, oh, I'm scared of snakes. That's a snake. I need to get out of here. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah. So the understanding how to control those different pathways, and where the anxiety is coming from. If it's coming from childhood experiences or events, that could potentially be coming from that cortex. But if it's that immediate body reaction, that those physical sensations of like we mentioned earlier, the heart racing, you're sweating, you're kind of standoffish, and all those little things, that's kind of that amygdala, that pathway response from there.
So my question: how do we change that amygdala? How do we change that to where, like, if I walk in, I'm like, oh, it's just a stick. It's not a snake. Or, or I was thinking too, what was, so another example, it was last year. So a lot of stuff that happened in my life, I changed my ways. But one of the things I would always nonchalantly, just randomly tell my wife little lies, stuff that I didn't think mattered or didn't pertain to her, wouldn't be a
Mm-hmm.
big deal. But I ran into a guy and he asked me something. And a little bit later, she asks me, what's he talking about? And I blew it off and I instantly lied to her.
Mm-hmm.
Just something you don't need to know about. And so within like 3 minutes, I was like, dude, you made this commitment to her. So I said, hey, let's have a talk. I said, I just lied to you there. She's like, why? I'm like, dude, it's the fight or flight, instantly. I
Yeah,
don't want to get in trouble. So I lied to you about it. And I
but
said,
that's
so now
exactly That's
But
exactly what you did there. That fight or flight, that amygdala responded before your cortex could say something, but the cortex was already kind of thinking about, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to, have this terrible argument or whatever that event or that experience was. That cortex was automatically thinking, but you allowed that amygdala to respond before you could really kind of think through it.
yeah, it's exactly what happened. And so, like, it took me 3 minutes. I'm like, all right, I got to come clean. But like, how do we change that amygdala to where I don't? How do I like take a second to actually think about what I'm about to do and think of like, oh, I guess the consequences.
And that's the hard part, and that's the where the behavioral change comes in. You have to kind of start to one recognize what's going on. So you have to recognize that in that situation, or in even the situation with the snake, you kind of have to see, oh well, what's going on in my body right now? Is this an anxious situation? Is my heart racing? Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I avoiding? Are there any physical symptoms? Am I emotionally shutting down? Am I yelling? Am I lying? What are these things going on in this situation that's kind of creating or forcing me to respond this way? And once you start to kind of figure that out, you can learn or kind of expose yourself more and more and more, through different interventions that allow you to kind of bring that, recognize the anxiety, and then also start to plug in little things that you can, positive affirmations and little things to start to bring you down. And it could take time. Initially it might take you 2 or 3 days to even come to your wife and have that conversation that, I lied because of, X, Y, and Z. But it also, hopefully over time, as you continue to kind of be in those anxious situations and realize, I don't have to respond this way, then you'll that amygdala will start to calm down and not necessarily feels like it has to lie.
Yeah, that's good. So it all starts with the old behavioral changes.
Behavioral changes. You mention it all the time, man. Those 2 minute Mondays, you drop a lot of gems the guys should be listening to.
I appreciate that, but and a lot of that times when I'm talking, I'm not like what you're talking about. Like you're qualified here. I'm not. I don't want to admit this, but I dropped out of college. Like I've had like school or hard knocks, whatever that's called. Like I'm just learning this stuff on the fly. But I mean, through reading books of personal development and changing my habits and going through some of these things. When you say behavioral changes, are you talking about like habits and routines? Because like say I'm saying positive affirmations, but do you have any other like are there other tips to start changing habits to where we can start focusing on the behavioral changes? Because I think too, sorry to ramble here, but like you said, it takes time. Like it takes a lot of time and effort to want to change. Because how many of us at night, if we're get home from work and we're tired, the first thing to do is pop a beer and just let's relax for a little bit. That's our relaxing method instead of maybe take 5 minutes when you get home and do 5 minutes of breathing exercise or 5 minutes of meditation to just cool down.
Right. And making those behavioral changes, you have to go into one, understanding what's going on, but also go into trying to change those behaviors with intention. Knowing like I'm going, like when I get home, I usually crack a beer open, I sit on the couch and one beer might lead to 12 kind
Yeah.
of thing. But if I'm going to change or plug in new routines, maybe I'm going to come home and I'm going to sit down and have a real discussion with my wife, or I'm going to plug in, I'm going to work out at this time. You have to start to plug in those little things that you enjoy that kind of make you happy to start to change those behaviors. And it takes time to relearn and really kind of reprogram the brain. Hypothetically, how these things kind of manifest in relationships, you hit the nail on the head. Anxiety, you felt like the relationship, or your wife had questions, and you kind of immediately lied about it. And on the other side, what that kind of did to her, even after you kind of admitted, like, I lied. I don't know why I lied. It was just, it was stupid. But in her head, that's creating those memories and those events that, hey, he might be a liar, and now she starts to have that anxiety about, is he telling me the truth? And those little things can kind of start to affect the relationship over time.
Oh, that's good. That's good because that's so true. And how many of us dudes in here lie without even necessarily thinking about it? It's just a small white lie. But how many of our wives probably don't fully 100% trust us because of so many situations we've put ourselves in or done or things like that? Because I know for a long, long time, my wife said, well, now she'll say, I trust you. I trust you fully. But she's like, there's a long time where I didn't trust you. I didn't trust you when you told me anything. I was like, I don't know if he's lying or not. And I was like, oof, that's not good, because long enough, you do that long enough, they're gonna leave.
Yeah, and you think about even over time and how past relationships and past experiences kind of build up, and as men not really addressing it, just kind of covering it up with things, and say you finally do get a woman who, really is out here, really about you, and you still have those negative things that you're kind of holding on to, those lies, that anxiety, that frustration. I use this as an example too. Sometimes in relationships, trust, that big trust factor. Um, if you if you if you've been hurt, brokenhearted in a relationship, and you haven't really dealt with that, maybe she lied to you, maybe she cheated, and things like that. If you don't really address the anxiety and anxious feelings when we get into a new relationship, she, like I said, she's 100% down for you in the relationship, but because she said, "Oh, I'm going out with some friends," you that anxious feelings start to ramp up because of those past relationships or those past events that you haven't addressed. So now the heart's racing. You're getting frustrated. You're calling her every 5 minutes. Those things. Now you've completely ruined her night. Now it's an argument at home.
Yep.
So that anxiety, and you've mentioned it so many times. You have to start with yourself. You can't blame. You can easily blame it on her. Well, she shouldn't be going out. She shouldn't be doing all these things. Well, you also shouldn't be a complete jerk. You have to take a step back and look at how you're responding to the situation and what caused you to respond to the situation the way you did.
And you bring up a great point, because how often do we just try to blame it on her whenever, or her or somebody else in any situation? How many of us now play the victim card because we don't
Mm-hmm.
want to take our own responsibility for our own faults, or address any of these actions or habits that we're doing that are bad, not good. But, just it's so much easier now to play the blame game than to take full responsibility for our own actions.
And sometimes we don't recognize those things, man, and it's because we've covered it up, we've ignored it, and there's so much that we could be doing ourselves affecting our relationships, and we're just not aware of it.
Yeah. Bringing it back around too, when you talk about fear, like what are some steps, like, to just, obviously, if it were easy to overcome fear, nobody would have any fears. But,
Mhm.
like, what causes fear, and how do we even address that? I don't even know where to begin, really.
I mean, there's like I mentioned, that fear it can come from a perceived threat that you're kind of making up in your head. Sometimes we create our own anxiety. I want to go on a trip, or I want to, even with Corona going on, I want to have family over, or I want to do something. But you also think, well, if I get sick, I can get the family sick that's home. I can get my friends sick, and all those things kind of start to create fear and kind of get you to spiral out of control. And what I notice with most people that have anxiety, they have negative running thoughts, or just running thoughts where it's just one thing after another, after another, after another, and they always feel like they're caught in this spiral, caught in this
Oh,
circle. And once you can figure out, like, oh, that's what's going on, you can start to break that fear response or that fear reaction. And it's usually like I said, the experiences and things that have built up in our head over time that are causing us to feel this way. And it could be, like I said, a real threat, or it could be a perceived threat. But that's what we're going. That's what's going on in our head that we kind of have to figure out. How can I move past this? How can I really address the underlying issues that are causing me to feel like this?
yeah. I think you make a good point with the negative thought cycle. Because, and it's easy to say I could wake up and just be positive, say today's gonna be a great day. But if in your head you're not believing that, and you're a pessimist about it, I don't know that it's super easy to become an optimist. But also, if you're having those positive thoughts, if you're saying those positive affirmations, or just like you said, you have to be intentional about the behavioral changes to get what you want out of life.
Hmm.
I mean, man, it's it's interesting. Like,
It sounds easy, but it's a lot harder said than done.
so much harder, because it just takes. I think a lot of guys think, if I've been doing this for a week and it's not working, it's garbage.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And it takes a lot of time
Yep.
for behavioral changes to really kick in. It's one of those things to where, well, like, if you go to the gym and you work out for 6 months, you start seeing results. You're like, yes. But on this isn't, you don't see physical changes. Maybe you see some physical changes, but I mean, it's like more in your head. That one day I started just thinking about things. I'm like, I've just come a long way from where I was, and I attribute it to, like, doing these habits every single day, and now my life's on the track that I want it to be. I guess.
Hmm. And I've even had to create behavioral changes in myself because of Corona. You know, before Corona happened, I was gearing up to start seeing clients in the office and you know really start marketing to see people face to face. And then you know March happened, bam, Corona hit. It's like, well, I you know my whole routine's off. I got to you know figure out my coaching, got to figure out my 9 to 5, got to figure out you know how I can start to see clients. And I had to take a step back and just kind of reassess everything and start to plug in those behavioral changes, those better routines to get in a better habit. I realize, you know, if I want this business to be successful, it has to become a lifestyle. I have to, you know, I can't sit around and play Xbox for, you know, 4 or 5 hours. I got to get off the Xbox and I really need to probably read something on anxiety, on depression. So I'm more knowledgeable about these situations when they come up when I'm talking to clients. So it's creating that behavioral change. And it didn't happen over time. Immediately, Corona's been going on kind of since March, but I'm now just getting into that habit.
Yep. Yep. And yeah, it takes time. And, so I met you at a workout, a CrossFit event. And so I think that you're still into CrossFit or working out at least. But do you think that all this stuff goes hand in hand too, as far as physical fitness, mental health? Does it all play a part? Is physical health important?
Absolutely. I still actually I coach right now. I do coach CrossFit, so
Okay.
this is kind of it goes hand in hand. But I do agree that to an extent, our physical health and is a part of our self care. A lot of people think they talk about self care. I need to do some retail therapy. I need to go out and have
Yeah.
drinks with a friend. And yet, yes, that's nice and all, but at the same time, you kind of have to take care of yourself. Your self care is everything about you, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. All those things need to be taken care of, and it's a hard balance to kind of figure out. One thing can be great. The emotional side can be great, but at the same time, you might be falling off spiritually. Or in the same time, physically,
Yeah.
a lot of things can manifest where you're not sleeping, you're not eating well. If you start to change those habits, you might have more energy to do other things. So all of this kind of connects to me. That's why I really, really kind of push people. Hey, if you really want to, when in depression, a lot of people kind of it's the down and out mentality. They're not motivated. They don't want to do anything, and the physical fitness piece is a big component of that. Let's get out. Let's go for a walk. Let's talk. Let's kind of just get you out of the space that's creating this downward and this down and out feeling so you can start to experience more and surround yourself with things that are going to make you happy and make you feel better about life.
That's awesome. So, I feel like just being active can create, new emotions. Like when we talked about this, like as men, we should hit on every emotion. Like how often should we hit on like the sad, I cry emotion? Like how often should a guy cry? Is there an answer to that? I don't know.
It's not a real answer to that, but don't hesitate to cry. Don't be scared to show those kind of emotions. Think about crying doesn't always have to be a sad thing. If you can just thinking about how it's where I've gotten from growing up where I came from, and you really getting to a point where I can genuinely help people. And the journey that I took to get here. Like one day I just sat around like, yo, like this, I'm happy. Like I haven't been this happy in so long. But just to see everything, and that's a good cry. Sometimes sad things happen, and you shouldn't be sad about it. I tell my dad, I tell my best friends, I love you all the time, and it's mainly just to show, like, hey, I do care about you. I don't care if you're a male, my brother or whatever. I love you, because I don't ever want to be in a situation where you're gone and I can't tell you I love
For sure. And I think that's good for guys to hear that, because growing up, my parents always told me they loved me. But I remember my mom saying there was times where like her mom and dad, she never heard that from her parents. And I'm like, dude, like my kids are going to know that I love them. And, so my wife told me a story today. She said, our middle daughter was acting crazy. She's like, I just told her to just go outside and walk around or just do something to stop being so wild. She was having a moment. And so then my wife took a video of her and she was just walking around the tree outside. But she said, then I watched her and she sat down on the bench and I just see her fold her hands and just start praying out loud, like by herself. I'm like, and that makes me tear up thinking, I feel like I'm doing a good job as a parent, that spiritually my 5-year-old daughter is out here. And she was saying, like, my wife said, I heard her saying, like, God, I love you more than I love myself. And I'm like, that hits home as a father. I'm like, I love that. But yeah, it's good. Like, well, who was it? Jimmy Valvano, was that his name, that coached the North Carolina State basketball team? He was dying of cancer, and he said that one of those. I'll just share that video sometime. But yeah,
Jimmy V, the V Foundation. Yeah, yeah.
like hit on every emotion. Like we're men, we're supposed to. It's not a bad thing.
No, like, and if you suppress those emotions, that what ends up happening is it comes out in another way. If you continue to cover up the fact that you're angry and upset, or you're sad, guess what? It's going to come out as anger later on. Or if you continue to cover up those things, it might come out the way you don't want it to come out, and hurt somebody or hurt yourself more than you intended to be, just because you've been suppressing those feelings for so long.
Yes, and I think that we as men probably all struggle with that. I know that there's things that I should probably come out and tell somebody, but instead, I'm one of those. I always struggle with my insecurities, that I was always busting people's balls, or just making fun of them for this, or making fun of them for that. When internally, I was the one that was struggling. Like, these dudes were, I'm probably just making them feel bad. Now I feel bad thinking about it, but I'm
Right.
like, no, it was actually my own fault. Until I came clean with myself, like, I had to just really own up to some of my own problems. And then, like you said, to be truly happy, like, I have a sense of freedom in my life now that I've never had. I'm like, this is good. This is a good feeling. And I like you, I want every man to experience these feelings. And I think
Right.
what you're doing is awesome, man. I hope that if anybody in here is having any issues, like, they feel comfortable enough to reach out to you, because, dude, you're helping tons of guys, and women too, I'm sure, but it's awesome.
It's nice to be in a situation to normalize talking about feelings and emotions, because I mean, growing up, in the Black community, we don't talk about these things. What's in house stays in house. And just kind of going back to what you said, you were upset, and you were hurting other people. I usually, when I'm in sessions, when there's a lot of negative things going on, or negative feedback from outside sources, I usually like to tell patients or clients, hurt people, because they don't know how to deal with their own insecurities, their own thoughts, their own emotions. So what they do is, if I make somebody else feel as crappy as I am, maybe I'll feel better, and that's usually not the case.
I got to write that down. Hurt people, hurt people. That's so true. And since I started this journey, I've even went as far, so, like, there were kids in my high school, I know, not that I was necessarily a bully, but I was just, like, not super nice to them. So I went back and I kind of tried to rehash some old relationships and say, hey, whatever. I am so sorry.
Mhm.
I even had, so I dated a girl for a while, and I went back, because we were older, we were in college, and I went back and said, hey, I'm sorry. I mean, I had my wife's permission. I said, "You care?" I mean, like, I feel like I have to at least own up to this, because I'm feeling so much conviction towards this. I got to apologize to her. And so,
Mhm.
just even doing little things like that, like, guys don't do that.
No,
But I
it,
felt
it's
a lot
it's
better.
hard for us to apologize.
And I feel like it gave them some, maybe not closure, but I think that they felt better about the situation. There's been like 3 or 4 of those, and now they pop up, and I'm just like, sorry, man.
Right, right. I
There,
mean, go ahead, go ahead.
I'll tell this story. There's a guy in this group that, when we were living in Charleston, we were drinking beer, and we pulled up beside this truck, and there was a cooler full of beer in back. And we just popped the hood of my trunk open. We put that cooler full of beer in my car, just took off. We had a great time. And so, I mean, it's been probably 2 months now, but now I'm friends with the guy. We just became friends. And so we were texting, and I was like, hey, what kind of beer do you like? And he told me, and I bought him a new cooler with like a couple of cases of beer. And I said, I got to pay my debts, man, and some interest on that. So, but yeah, I'm like, it's cool. I'll own up and admit to my mistakes, because it makes me feel better too.
Yeah, and admitting, I mean, that's a sign of growth, man. If you still had the same mentality that you had, 5, 10 years ago when that happened, we might have to have a different discussion.
Yeah,
But that's how we grow. I mean, we own up to our mistakes, and even in this whole mental health thing, you have to understand that sometimes you're going to fail, and it's okay, because the good thing in failing is you can learn from those mistakes. You know, the, the best part, growth happens when you realize you can't keep making those mistakes.
for sure. For sure. Dude, that's great. Uh, Marvin, where can guys find you at? Obviously, you're a part of the Structure U group, but if they, have questions, or want to reach out to you somewhere else, where can they get with you at?
Absolutely. I have a Facebook page, Be Strong Mental Health. I'm on Instagram, Be Strong MH. And then if you really want, if you're interested in maybe some therapy services, I'm doing teletherapy, and I'm licensed in Illinois. So teletherapy, I can reach anybody. As long as you're in the state of Illinois, you can reach out to me and I can be your therapist. I offer free consultations so we can make sure that I'm the right therapist for you. Because I tell people all the time that, building our therapeutic relationship is just as important as what we discuss in therapy. If you don't feel comfortable talking to me, if you feel comfortable opening up to me, we won't make a lot of progress.
Dude, that's awesome.
And then lastly, my website is bestrongmh.com. And you can find me there. You can book a session. You can shoot me an email. And then there's also Facebook links and Instagram links there as well.
Awesome. Man, you are on the right path. And I'm so happy you took the time out to talk with us tonight. And dude, just good for you. I'm happy for you.
Man, I'm happy. Like I said, I'm happy, dude. It's exciting to be in this position. And I just can't wait to continue to kind of help people. And, when I leave this world, I want to be able to say, I helped enough people. I put people in a position so they can continue to kind of help themselves. And then that's what I'm looking for, dude. It's gratifying just to help people.
For sure. Well, that's awesome, Marvin. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this platform.
All right. See you, Marvin.